We are going to move on now with another visual storyteller of sorts, this time not from the world of fashion, but from the world of illustration. And he has a very distinctive style. If you don't know his name, then you probably have seen his work on the cover of a magazine somewhere. He's captivated audiences all over the world. Please give it up for Mr. Edel Rodriguez.
Thank you. Hi, I come from America with good news. Ha ha. Anyways, let's get started here.
I grew up in Cuba, in a small town. I think my past is always in my work, in one way or another. In Cuba, you'll see a bright red car, a Chevy, and say a Ford drive by, it's cerulean blue, and then a yellow house behind it. So if you look at my work, it's in very intense colors. Why I work in news and political art? Why do people wake up in the morning and drink juice, or why do you drink water? It's just, to me, it's normal. It's what I've lived with my entire life. I think every artist has something that they wake up to and that inspires them and gets them going. I wake up to read what the news is. I think it is that idea that I always feel someone is being victimized, someone's being taken advantage of, and I feel like I need to speak about that. A lot of people say, what's the purpose? Why am I going to make posters? It's not going to change anyone's mind. And that's not why I make art. It's not to change someone's mind. It's just to say, hey, this is wrong. Someone was there saying this was wrong. You have proof, you have a poster, you have something that you can look at going, not everyone was with this, You just stand up for what's correct and what you feel is right. You put it out there, you let people learn from it. And maybe it takes 10 years or 20 years for people to understand what you were talking about, but it's important to do it.
So it all started here in Cuba. I grew up on a very small farm south of Havana. That's me on the horse. I was raised in the 70s during the Cold War when there was this battle between the Soviet Union and the United States. And Cuba sided with the Soviet Union, and we were raised like, they called us pioneers for the revolution. So the idea that you would eventually get into the army and become a soldier. And it starts at a very early age. This is me at the Pionero ceremony, getting my kind of Che Beret hat. And these are some of the kind of graphics that I grew up with in the countryside near my town. Slogans such as socialism or death, homeland or death. So these kinds of things made a very big impact on me as a kid. This is my family in 1979. We would have these big parties at our farm. And by now, all of these people have left Cuba. The system just got to a point where we couldn't live there any longer. Our exit from Cuba was the Mariel boatlift, which was an exodus of people from Cuba that was organized by refugees in Miami. At this point in time, Castro had said we had become a sort of a nuisance to him. And he said, anybody that wants to leave the country can leave. You are worms. We don't want you in this country. You're just taking from the revolution. Leave. So my family got on this boat. This is the four of us over here, and I'm the little kid over there with the red coat. This is me as well. You don't bring a photographer with you when you flee a country. So it's taken many years of research, but I was able to find the photographers. There were photographers on our boat covering the story for various magazines. And there was one time I met this photographer at Time magazine, where I was actually working at the time. And we started talking to each other, and this photographer looks at me And he asked, when did you come from Cuba? And I'm like, oh, 1980. What date? I said, May 1st, 1980. And he said, I was on your boat that day. And I took your pictures. I know your eyes. And these are the photographs that this photographer had in his library. This is 15 years after we left. So these pictures have come to me through a strange set of circumstances. But anyways, I went from this kind of graphics of the revolution to overnight to this kind of graphics. So as a child, these things get mixed up, visually. And I became fascinated immediately by American rock and roll, Kiss. We would do these concerts for our family at family parties. Eventually, I headed off to art school in New York City at Pratt Institute. And now this is me in my studio in my hometown. Still painting on boxes, doing a lot of things with my hands. When I was a kid, I learned from my grandfather, who was a carpenter, to just work with my hands, make things, and I bring that into my work a lot. I tend to work in series. This is a series where I decided I just want everything to do, these little white dots. I'm also influenced by Cuban, Afro-Cuban graphics, like Santeria and religions. And I try to bring that into some of my work. And I'm also influenced by materials. So for example, this one here is made from coffee and acrylic paint. And it's basically working in my studio. And I'm like, what if I start using coffee? And I brought that into my work, and I've created an entire series just based on coffee. And I take all of this that I do in my painting studio, and I bring it to my assigned work. This is a series of posters that I've created for operas and plays, movie posters, work for rock bands like Spoon, and book covers. But the thing that I've become most known for has been magazine covers. I've done about 200 to 300 magazine covers now. These are a couple for Time and Newsweek magazine. And the first time that I really noticed a magazine cover made an impact was this communication arts cover that I created. It was a special issue on Cuban design, and they asked if I would create a cover, and this idea came to mind. At that time, the revolution had changed. It was no longer a communist or socialist revolution. It was turning into kind of a strange amalgam of communism and capitalism in Cuba. So I created this cover, and it hit the internet. This is around 2006, and it got a lot of attention, a lot of conversations started. And I thought, okay, well, magazine covers have changed, not just something you pick up at the store. It's sort of the start of a conversation that happens on the internet amongst people that pick up the magazine. In 2014, I was shocked by what was happening with ISIS in the Middle East, and didn't feel like magazines or magazine covers were covering the topic, because it was a very difficult topic to talk about. So I thought, what if I start my own campaign? At this time, we had Twitter, Instagram, all these places. And I said, if I can put stuff out there about ISIS and what's happening in the Middle East, maybe people will pay more attention to it, maybe we'll cover it more. So I created this campaign about extremism, and done in a very extreme way. This was, I love New York. I thought that would get people's attention in New York City. So I began a street campaign of posters. After the online, it got a lot of attention online. Then I went to street posters around New York City. This is a perfect example of someone not paying attention to what's happening right behind them. So I like that combination of image and photograph. But then 2016 comes along, and I realized that the thing that's affecting me the most wasn't ISIS. It was a different kind of extremism, which was American extremism. And I began to take those images that I had done and just replace them with a little red hat, the MAGA hat. This was in 2016, right when the Trump was first starting to run for president. I then decided to create the same kind of campaign that I created on ISIS on Trump and right-wing extremism in the United States, but I needed a character. So I tried to come up with something that was very simple, very direct, very limited color palette. And I designed this kind of character, no eyes. Feel if you have a person with eyes looking at you, you have a little bit more of a connection. And I wanted you to have no connection to this guy. I just wanted you to try to look more at the ideas and the things that he was doing. So that was my first sort of sketch. This was one of the first sort of version that I did of it, and I began to put these again just on my feeds. I think of my cell phone as a printing plant now. And the idea was, if I could get these images out there in the bloodstream of art directors, designers, editors, they would treat this man and what he represents in a much more confrontational way. I had worked at Time Magazine as art director, and the tendency is to treat presidents in the United States with a lot of respect. And when you do that, you make that person seem presidential. I didn't want that to happen. I wanted to kind of get in the middle of that and show that you need to confront extremism and not just take it for granted. So I created these images. These images went online, hoping that they would call me. And then, yeah, that dog. Takes a while, but you get it. That was me just walking around my neighborhood, and I saw a no poop sign, and I was like, Trump. So that's how I got ideas. But the idea was to try to get art directors at these magazines to call me, to see what they would see what the images that I was putting up online and call me. And eventually, about 6 months later, the art director of Time Magazine called me and said, hey, I see what you're doing on the internet. It's great. We love it. Can you create a cover for us? We have a headline called Meltdown. And I said, yeah, I can do that. It's pretty easy. And I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. So I created a cover for them, and this was it. It hit the internet, immediately got, the entire, the country just went nuts. And a magazine was publishing this in the middle of a campaign. It's really not typical. We wouldn't show this or do this in the United States. Then, since it got so much attention, about 2 months later, they had, it felt like his campaign was totally melting down, so we had a follow-up, which is total meltdown. And these two covers became so popular that they got on the internet, it went on television, and out of that, I decided to create a street campaign of posters, which is what I did here, and I wanted to show you some of them. So this is what some of the posters look like, and I took them to various places around New York City. This is in Trump's hotel. I left it on a coffee table. Yeah. And then I would go to Times Square, and I would go, you want a poster? Like that? You guys want posters? There you go. There you go. Pass them around. Yeah. So I go to Times Square, and then what happened was that people would kind of take ownership of the posters. And if you agreed with the point of view, people would start taking pictures with them and posting them online, posting them on Instagram. And it takes the message that I was doing. I felt I needed help. And I went to the public to spread these images, spread these ideas. And that was that poster campaign. Then Der Spiegel really liked what I was doing for Time Magazine and asked me to create something right around the same time of the election. And I created this one, Trump hurling towards Earth. Process-wise, this is what kind of my sketches look like when I'm trying to develop a concept. Then he was elected. I wasn't successful. But success is not the important thing. It's that you're against it. And the first thing he did was create the Muslim ban, which was this idea that no Muslims were welcome in the United States. He passed the law. It was his first thing in office. So again, I went back to my ISIS extremist images, just slapped on the Statue of Liberty, put Trump's head, and I posted this on my Twitter account, just out of anger, like not thinking it would be a cover or anything. 2 days later, the Der Spiegel art director calls me and says, hey, we see what you put in your Twitter feed. Can we publish that? Now, that's the first time that had happened to me, that something from my Twitter feed then becomes a cover. You usually get assigned a cover. So I realized that things were changing. I wasn't being called as an assignment. I was being called for permission to publish something of mine. Now, my Twitter feed has a number of people, but not the readership of Der Spiegel or Time magazine. So Der Spiegel published this, came out on a Friday at 6 p.m., and 5 minutes later, I had like the Washington Post, New York Times, a bunch of people calling me, nervously asking, well, did you do that? Why? What's going on? And I'm like, yeah, you know, and I think as artists, we work with imagery, so I don't really think of it in extreme ways, but when this lands in someone's house, yeah, I can see that it can be complicated. So immediately, these images were downloaded from the internet, posters were made, taken to protests around the country. I became part of the story because I'm an immigrant, so it was this idea that this young not that young, but immigrant, I was young once, immigrant was taking on the President of the United States. So I got a lot of friends online. This was constant, a lot of messages saying horrible things to me, that I'm a pathetic traitor and I should be hung. So I saved these, and I have a hate mail folder in case anything happens to me. It's on my desktop. But what it does to an artist, when you tell people you can't do something or say things like that, it just makes you want to do it more. So I did this one, I did that one. I did more covers for Der Spiegel and Time magazine, and more. I made a whole campaign to put impeach stickers on peaches. Kept on going. This one, Marguerite. This is not a president. I think I've done about 400 of these images now. And at the same time, what happened, people, as I shared my posters here, I put this entire folder of images on the internet, and I told people, download them, make your own posters, bring them to protests. And when I did that, people listened and people brought them to protests. So it's this idea of getting the images to spread as much as possible. It then went into ad campaigns, so it flipped from just me and editorial to ads. So this is an advertising firm in London, decided to do a whole campaign with this sort of character. It went into the London Tube, and Wyden Kennedy did a whole show of this work at their ad agency in Portland. They were very supportive of this work from the very beginning. And the one thing they asked me when we're putting this show together is like, we have a staff here at the agency. Is there anything that you would want to do that you haven't done yet? And I said, yeah, I don't have time to do a piñata, but I'd really like to. So they had someone on staff make a giant piñata, and when they asked what to fill it with, I said Cheetos. So we filled it with Cheetos, and everybody just whacked at it. And one story about this poster, this is on the Lower East Side in New York City. Here's this poster. So I made, so it's pretty big, I made about 200 hand silk screened posters. This is a 5-color silk screen. And I started taking them around New York City. And as I was putting up this image, I was surrounded by 5 guys, like 5 young guys. And they're like, what you doing? And I'm like, man, I'm just putting up posters. We're the police. So there were secret police dressed as hipsters. Yeah. So they're like, and I immediately put my hand in my pocket, and they're like, take it out, take your hands out. I'm like, okay. So they took my ID, took all my information, they wanted to arrest me, and I said, I'm just a teacher at SVA. I was trying to give my IDs, whatever. But in the end, they let me go, and they said, "We're gonna let you go. You just can't do this any longer." And as they let me go, I'm packing away my stuff, and they're like, "Can we have a copy?" And I was like, "What?" They're like, "Yeah." So I gave it. As I was giving to them, they said, "Can you sign it?" I said, "I'm not gonna sign it, man." So all of this work is collected in this book that that was done by a Spanish museum. These are some of the images in it. And what was interesting is that as I was doing this, people asked me, "Are you afraid that you won't get work, that you'll get canceled? Who knows what?" But in the end, what's happened? It's created all sorts of other work for me. U2 got in touch to do all their graphics for their concerts in 2018. These are some of those graphics from their tour. This is in New York City, various venues, subway posters in New York City for SVA. And my last thing that I wanted to show you was that all of these stories are in this book that I made. It's a memoir. It's 300 pages, fully illustrated, and it's basically about my life growing up in Cuba, coming to America, and then having to deal with extremism, both in Cuba and in the United States. And these are some of the spreads from the book. It took me about 10 years to develop, interviews with my family, with my parents, and 3 years to write. And as I was finishing writing, the insurrection happened. So I was able to put, at the last minute, sort of a finishing spread of the insurrection. And just when I thought it was over, we're back at it again. This is the latest cover that I did for Time magazine with Trump coming back. And thank you.
Thank you. Lovely. Edel, fantastic. It pains me to say that we've run out of time, so there's no time for me to ask you any questions, but you're around. 13 years worth of effort into this, baby.
Yeah.
So go and grab a copy. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
Okay, Saskia.